Let's edit together. I'm Iris Marsh, and I help indie authors publish their manuscripts with confidence. So today we're going to have a look at a made-up piece of fiction, very short, um, and I will show you kind of how I went through the edits with some explanations with it. So hopefully you can see both how an editor approaches these edits, so kind of what you can expect when you hire an editor, and hopefully it also gives you some insight into what you can do when you edit your own manuscript. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so let's have a look here. It was generated by AI, ChatGPT for this instance, purely for this purpose. So it's a fictionalized example, just to show you some editing techniques. It's not something written by an actual author. So first we're going to have a look at the original it came up with. It's always a good idea to first read through to give us a sense of the author's voice, the POV it was written in, and anything that might be repetitive at some point, like certain themes or certain phrases, so that we can then have a look at where that type of phrasing might make the most sense. So we can keep it there, but cut it in other places, so that it's not as repetitive. So you can pause the screen and just have a read through. In general, important to note here is that the POV is third person limited. This means that it's generally a quite close POV. We can see the character from a slight distance, but we do know what that character is thinking and feeling. Like the narrator does know that, and the narrator only knows that for that one character at a time. But the narrator is still a distinct person, if you will, from the actual POV character. So this is a bit different from a third person deep POV. I like to kind of view that one as if you were playing like these RPG games like Zelda or The Witcher, where you are the character, only you still view the character from behind. But you still are the character, right? You're playing as the character. Everything you do influences the character, stuff like that. So here the narrator is much more closely entwined with the protagonist. So it's very similar to first person, only it's third person. The difference is mostly in the narration itself, in that with third person deep, the narration should also be more close to the character's voice, not the narrator's voice, so not the author's voice, whatever you want to call it. And we're much more closed off to their perspective. So if we have third person limited, the narrator can still note things that are outside of the character's perception. However, in deep third, you want to avoid that as much as possible because we're as close to the character as we can get in third person. Okay, so now that we've established that, let's have a look at the edits I made. Just need to switch the... There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to go through. It looks like a lot, but you'll see that it's not that bad. And again, this is mostly for illustrative purposes. So here, the sentence, Elena moved through the grove. So here, moved is what we call a weak verb because it doesn't really show us anything, right? Elena could be walking, she could be riding a moped. Like, I don't know. She moves through something, it doesn't tell us anything. So here, based on context, like her boots are crunching over frost-laced leaves, so this indicates that it's icy. So I went with trudged, so she kind of moves slowly. However, I did query the author, the fictional author here, other types of words they could use instead. Then the next sentence, her breath fogged in the dim early morning air, hanging there for a few moments before fading away like a ghost. So, I mean, dim early morning air, you could revise it by just having early morning air or just dim morning air, but I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. Here I got the hanging there for a few moments before fading away like a ghost. because her breath fogged in the air, like that already suggests that it's hanging there for a few moments, right? That already gives us that imagery. So there's no need to really repeat that here. So then we can just have a shorter, snappier sentence that's like, her breath fogged in the dim early morning air before fading away like a ghost. Then we have a bit of a complex sentence because it's she felt the stone, she felt the pull of the stone hidden in her pocket, warm against the biting cold. Like, this is very vague. So I did remove the she felt here to get rid of some filtering. With third person limited, you can have some filtering to establish POV. That's fine. But since we already all mentioned Elena here, I think we can get rid of the filtering here. It's not really necessary. We already know that we're in her experience here. But since this is very vague, I put in a comment. For one, pulled here is a bit of a weak verb. It doesn't really tell us anything about what she's feeling. And there is just a lack of specificity. Like, what exactly is she feeling? Like, what is that stone actually doing? Like, is it actually guiding her based on the context around it? It's probably not. But is it just that it kind of feels warm at some points when it shouldn't? Like, is there some kind of magical thing to it? Does it shift weight? What does it actually do, right? Is it even a little bit guiding her or not? So that's where I put in a query for the author to kind of specify that and add a bit more context to this, so the reader can follow along a bit more clearly. Then we have, it was guiding her, or maybe that was just her hoping it would. It's a bit of an awkward reading sentence, so I simplified it to, or so she hoped. That still fits with the overall point with the text, but it's a lot more condensed. And it's maybe a nice thing where you have two short sentences right after each other. Then this seems like I edited a lot, but what I actually did is move sentences around, because here we have some really nice imagery of the trees and the branches and the limbs tangling together. And then she looks around, trying to see if anything looks different. Nothing does, and then the air carries a strange tension, like the forest holding its breath. So I moved that first sentence about the trees and the limbs of sleeping giants after she scans around, because that makes more logical sense, right? So we have, instead of she looks around, scanning the grove again, which is kind of double, like she's looking around and scanning. Looking around is more a weak phrasing, you could say, a weak kind of verb, because looking doesn't specify to us how she's looking. Whereas scanning is a lot more specific, because that's kind of the thing. Stronger verbs are more specific than weak verbs. So instead we can change it to she scanned the grove, and we don't really need again, because I mean she wasn't really scanning the grove before this, so I don't know why there would be again here. And then trying to see if anything looked different, we remove that. Here, I mean, you could, but then we can have the more logical nothing looked different after she scanned. So then we just remove it here to avoid any repetition. Then the original was, the trees around her creaked with the weight of the snow, their bare limbs tangled together above her like the fingers of sleeping giants. I made it the surrounding trees. So again, we remove the around her, because we're already centered in her perspective. We can just say the surrounding trees. Creak with the weight of snow. Again, you can see that I kept that the same. Their bare limbs tangled together above her like the fingers of sleeping giants. So I kept that the same because it's a nice imagery. And here the above her, I think is fine, because they are above her. And then we can have nothing look different. So again, she scans. This is what she sees. Nothing looks different, right? That's then the conclusion of the scanning. Then here I changed but the air carried a strange tension, like the forest was holding its breath. That's because air, this is where a cold read comes in handy. I have air here, but she has air, the writer has air in the next paragraph as well. The air seems thicker here. So to kind of remove that repetition, that echo of that air being really close together, I removed it here because I think here in the air seems thicker. That phrasing makes more sense. And then in this paragraph right here, we can keep the metaphor of the force was holding its breath, or the simile, I think it is. I always forget those two. By changing it a bit, yet it seems like the forest was holding its breath. So we keep that sense of anticipation without having that double, the air is carrying a strange tension, the air seems thicker, right? So here, she moved towards, so move towards, again we have move, which is a weak verb, and towards indicates where she's moving to, so we can easily exchange that for approached, because that's what she's doing. The standing stone at the center of the grove. And in the original, this is where the sentence stopped, and it jutted out of the ground like a tooth, dark with age and flecked with moss. So instead, I made the sentence longer here because these sentences, so this one, that one, this one, all have very similar sentence length. And when you have sentences with very similar sentence length, it can sound really monotonous. Monotonous? I always struggle with the word. Anyway, it can sound the same. Too much, and that's not really what you want. So by lengthening this sentence here, we changed kind of the flow of this paragraph. It makes it more dynamic. Then here, she hesitated before touching it. So hesitated before touching it, that's telling, right? It doesn't tell the reader how she's hesitating. So I added an example for the author. She reached out her hand, let it hover above the stone. However, I also queried the author. It's like, this is the example I put here to show her hesitation. But, please write it out however you would write it out. Like, however she would show her hesitation. Then the air seemed thicker here, heavy with something old and powerful. We already have thicker air is usually, sorry. Thicker air is usually heavy, right? So instead of having heavy, I had it be charged, but of course the author can also use a different word if they prefer, with something old and powerful. I don't think this is a good idea, she whispered, though there was no one around to hear her. So I moved to hear her because that's kind of obvious. So we don't really need that. So she whispered, though there was no one around, period. And then the original is, the moment her fingers brushed the stone, a sharp jolt went through her. This kind of construction is very common, but it loses immediacy. Immediacy. Is that that? Yeah. So instead I removed the moment, and then we get, her fingers brushed the stone, and the sharp jolt went through her. She gasped and staggered back, stumbling, instead of almost falling, because almost falling means you're stumbling. And this also increases the pace. I mean, you could increase the pace by making these really short sentences. So her fingers brushed the stone, a sharp jolt went through her, she gasped, staggered back, stumbled, or something like that. But you can also increase the pace by having this immediacy and just having more verbs in succession. Like, that also works to increase the pace because verbs are active, and when you have a lot of active things in a row, it gives us the sense of things going faster, if you follow my meaning. So we have brushed, went, gasped, staggered, stumbling. Then the stone pulsed instead of was pulsing now. I mean, the stone was pulsing now. It's not wrong, but it's not really necessary to have that kind of grammatical structure, to have that tense, because the stone is just pulsing, so the stone pulsed, since we're writing in past tense. Light running through it in veins like lightning caught in granite, so that's all fine. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She'd heard the old tales, of course, and then there was this M dash, but she hadn't really believed them, so I exchanged that for a comma. And the original here was, she wasn't so sure what she believed anymore, right? So we have, She'd heard the old tales, of course, but she hadn't really believed them. She wasn't so sure what she believed anymore. Then we have this echo of believed. That's not really necessary. And we kind of want to avoid having too many echoes. And believed, if we have that in close succession, really draws the attention to it. And it's not a deliberate use of echo words, because then it would be a much more impactful sentence. So to kind of counter that, I revised it here to now she wasn't so sure. That still captures the type of voice that's in this story, while also cutting the believed, and it just makes sense. So, in the original, here we have the then the whisper came, soft and cold, curling around her like fog. I removed the then the, and just made it a whisper came, soft and cold, curling around her like fog, because to me the then the here kind of functions as the suddenly a whisper came, or all of a sudden a whisper came, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it's done a lot and you generally don't really need it because we're already reading in succession what's happening, right? So here a whisper came just makes just as much sense as you would have then the whisper came. And also the use of the here, I don't know, it just kind of signifies that there's the whisper, you know, when we don't really know what it is yet. So a whisper makes more sense to me. Return it. Sorry, I had to. She froze. Who's there? So that's all fine. Return it, the whisper repeated. Instead of the no answer came, just the whisper again, closer this time. So when possible, I would always advise just showing it unless it's really not necessary to do so. But here it doesn't really, like telling no answer came, just whisper again doesn't really gain you much. Like it's not shorter and it's not more impactful or dramatic. It's just no answer came, just whisper again, closer this time, which is fine, but I would then opt for return it, whisper repeated, closer this time. But you know, that's a bit of a taste thing as well. So again, always would query and say this is what I would do. But you know, the author can always choose not to if they don't like it. Then she turned around quickly. So here, turned around quickly has turned, which is also kind of a weak verb because we can turn in a variety of ways. And the quickly that's added suggests that the author knows this. And the quickly here describes how she's turning. When we also have a verb that does this in one word, which is spun. She spins, we spin. They spin. Spinning. The verb is spinning. She spun, hand reaching for the hilt of the dagger, though it felt like trying to fight mist with steel. So here we have another sentence that I thought was really vague. And I don't really know what the author means here, so I queried that I'm not really sure of the meaning. Like, is she reaching for the dagger and is then like using the dagger to cut through the mist? Like, you know, she's trying to attack the whisper? Or, which I kind of like more as the intent here, but I don't know if that was the intent. Or is she trying to reach the dagger and trying to reach it feels like fighting mist with steel or something, like some invisible force is holding her back. Like, I have no idea. So I just added like, I think you mean the former, in which case I would kind of do something like this. Like here I have, she wheeled around, but like you could have, she spun, dagger in hand, fighting mist with steel, something like that, or whatever else the author would prefer. Then we have, I didn't take anything, she said, louder now, her voice breaking the silence. This is all redundant as a dialogue tag, because louder now is pretty redundant since we have the exclamation mark here. And her voice breaking the silence, also redundant because we can already know that the only thing there was the whisper. And it also kind of not really makes sense with what follows, because the grove remains still, but there was still a sound, her breathing. So, I don't know. I would remove this because it doesn't really add anything, it's redundant. And I also added the suggestion, you could consider an action beat to kind of show her panic more. like her turning around in circles, slashing her dagger at nothing. Because I like that imagery because it kind of shows that she's freaked out, and it shows that she's a character who fights back under threat. So both of those things could be good characterization if you add that as an action beat. Then, but the grove remains still, so I removed the but, because why? The grove remains still is perfectly fine. The only sound was a breathing, too loud, too fast. She shifted back to the stone, and here, and it was dark again. That was the original. And and it was dark again, the light was gone. Like, those mean essentially the same thing, because if the light was gone, then the stone is also dark again. So I would opt for either one of those things, and I think the light was gone makes more sense. But if the author prefers, she could also go with and it was dark again, like it had never been there at all. But since this sentence references there, like it had never been there, which means the light, I would go with the light was gone, like it had never been there at all. So when you do all that, this is what you get. And then, of course, remember, there are still two sentences that were unclear. So the author would definitely also need to revise some of that on their own. And, with the added comments and queries, the author can, of course, make any of their own revisions in the text as well, as they see fit. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and gave you some information about some thought process behind editing, or what it might look like if you go to an editor. Thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful for you. And if you liked it, be sure to check out some of my other videos for some editing techniques. And also check out some articles on my website for more line editing techniques and copy editing techniques and all the editing techniques. I'll have some linked below in the description that shed some more light and give you some more background on some of the edits I performed in the video. That's it, and see you next time. Thank you for watching.